In the mid-13th century, the world trembled under the hooves of Mongol horses. Their vast empire, built through relentless conquest, stretched from the windswept plains of Mongolia to the very heart of Europe. It left cities in smoldering ruins and mighty empires reduced to mere memories. The Mongols were a force unlike anything the world had ever seen, and their leader, a man whose name alone inspired both awe and terror, had laid the foundation for this unstoppable war machine, Genghis Khan. By the time of his death in 1227, his legacy was secured. His sons and grandsons carried his vision forward, sweeping across Asia and the Middle East with an insatiable hunger for expansion. By 1260, the Mongols had already obliterated the once powerful Khwarezmian Empire, crushed the resistance of the Song dynasty in China, stormed into Russia, and reduced the Grand Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad to nothing but ashes. The Ilkhanate, a Mongol Khanate ruled by Hulagu Khan, one of Genghis Khan's grandsons, had carved through Persia and Mesopotamia, pushing further into the Levant. The last line of defense in the region, the Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt, stood alone against the Mongol tide. Hulagu was ruthless. In 1258, he sacked Baghdad, ending the Abbasid Caliphate in a storm of blood and fire. The Mongols then turned westward, their eyes fixed on the lands of Syria and Egypt, controlled by the Mamluks. Aleppo was the next to fall, its defenders slaughtered without mercy. With every conquest, Hulagu sent envoys to those who remained, offering them a choice: submit and become vassals, or resist and face total annihilation. The Mongols did not merely conquer, they destroyed. Their armies left behind mountains of skulls, their captives burned alive, and their cities reduced to nothing but whispers of past glory. In early 1260, the same ultimatum reached Cairo. Hulagu's message to the Mamluks was clear: surrender or suffer the same fate as Baghdad. Sultan Qutuz, ruling in Egypt, knew there was no choice but war. The Mamluks, originally slave warriors who had risen to power through sheer ability, understood that they faced an existential threat. The Mongols had swept away every army that had dared to oppose them. But Qutuz was not alone. Among his ranks was a man who would soon carve his name into history: Baibars, a brilliant commander and former slave, with an unmatched understanding of battlefield tactics. The Mamluks knew they could not defeat the Mongols in open combat. The Mongols were faster, more experienced, and feared across the known world. So instead of engaging in a battle of brute force, Qutuz and Baibars devised a different strategy. They would rely on deception, patience, and carefully planned strikes. Even though the Mongol Empire seemed invincible, it was not without internal conflict. The death of Great Khan Munka in 1259 had triggered a power struggle between his brothers, causing Hulagu to withdraw the bulk of his forces to secure his claim to the throne. This left Kitbuka, a seasoned Mongol general, in command of a much smaller force. Kitbuka, though loyal and fiercely devoted, understood that he did not have the overwhelming numbers typical of Mongol campaigns. However, his pride and faith in Mongol superiority drove him forward. He had been entrusted with the final conquest of the Levant, and he would not fail. The Mongols were masters of warfare, their military innovations unmatched. Their composite bows, capable of piercing armor at great distances, were wielded with deadly precision by highly disciplined cavalry units. Their psychological warfare, spreading terror through massacres, deception, and misinformation, ensured that most enemies surrendered before battle even began. Their sophisticated communication system, the Yam, allowed them to relay orders rapidly across vast distances, ensuring coordination between armies separated by thousands of miles. Yet against the Mamluks, these very strengths would be tested like never before. The Mamluk army, on the other hand, was unlike any other. Comprising former slaves who had undergone rigorous military training, they were warriors forged in discipline and hardship. Their cavalry tactics, particularly their ability to feign retreat and launch sudden counterattacks, were honed to perfection. They had studied the Mongols, learning their strategies and adapting to counter them. More than just warriors, they saw themselves as defenders of Islam against a relentless invader. The stakes were not just political, but spiritual. The first step was assembling an army. Unlike the Mongols, who relied on speed and relentless assaults, the Mamluks had built their strength in disciplined formations and superior cavalry tactics. They also knew the Mongols thrived in the open field, so they needed a battleground that negated their greatest advantages. Scouting missions were sent across Syria, searching for the perfect terrain to confront the Mongols. Ain Jalut, a valley in present-day Palestine, was chosen. It was narrow enough to limit the Mongols' famed mobility and provided opportunities for ambushes, something rarely possible against the Mongols. As the Mamluks prepared, the Mongols advanced. Hulagu, however, had been forced to return east due to the death of the great Khan Munka in 1259, leaving behind a smaller force under the command of his trusted general Kitbuka. The Mongols, though fewer in number, remained fearsome. Kitbuka led his forces south, sweeping into Mamluk territory with the same aggression that had destroyed countless cities before. Yet something was different. The Mongols were used to overwhelming their enemies, crushing them with sheer speed and power. This time, however, they sensed something elusive. Whispers of betrayal had begun to spread. The Crusader states, longtime foes of the Mamluks, had remained suspiciously quiet. Though the Mongols had expected them to at least harass the Mamluks, there were reports that certain Crusader lords had granted the Mamluks safe passage. This was a sign of shifting alliances, a crack in the illusion of Mongol invincibility. Kitbuka, undeterred, continued his march. As he approached Ain Jalut, he found no sign of the Mamluk army, but he knew they were close. The Mongols scouted ahead, wary of an ambush. Yet they saw nothing but open plains and scattered hills. It appeared the Mamluks had abandoned the fight. But this was exactly what Baibars had planned. The Mamluks had withdrawn into the valley, hidden from view, waiting for the right moment. As the Mongols moved deeper, the trap was set. The battle began when a small Mamluk vanguard appeared, engaging the Mongols before feigning retreat. This was a classic Mongol tactic, but Baibars had turned it against them. Kitbuka, thinking he had the advantage, pursued the fleeing Mamluks into the valley. As they charged forward, the Mongols suddenly found themselves surrounded. From the hills and ridges, Mamluk forces emerged, cutting off their escape. The Mongols, for the first time in decades, were caught in a position they could not easily maneuver out of. The air was thick with dust and the screams of dying men. Arrows rained down from above, striking Mongol riders as they struggled to regroup. Kitbuka fought like a demon, cutting down enemies with his sword, but the Mamluks pressed in relentlessly. Blood soaked the earth as the two forces clashed in a chaotic, brutal melee. The Mongols, used to being the unstoppable force, now found themselves encircled, leaderless, and dying. Kitbuka, refusing to retreat, called for his men to fight to the last. But the tide had turned. The Mamluks, disciplined and prepared, struck with precise coordination. Kitbuka was eventually captured and executed. Leaderless, the Mongol forces collapsed, retreating in disarray. The defeat at Ain Jalut marked the beginning of Mongol decline in the West. The Mamluks had proven that they were more than just defenders. They were victors. Baibars' rise to power following the battle saw the Mamluks strengthening their rule and pushing back against both Mongol and Crusader threats. Ain Jalut became a symbol of resistance, a moment when the tide of history shifted, ensuring that the Mongol advance into the heart of the Islamic world was stopped forever.